Good evening. My name is Robbie Carroll, and this is PCDA TV, episode 2. Tonight, I am joined by Peter Bunting. Pete is the head coach of PCDA Georgia. Pete, welcome to the show.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. Super grateful to be here.
Yeah, buzzing to have you on, mate. I've been looking forward to this show all week, so I'm excited to get started here. So, Pete, let's get started. Tell us about yourself.
Sure, man. Yeah, I've been around the game pretty much my whole life. I was maybe considered the unpopular choice in the early 70s to want to become a professional soccer player, as there really wasn't much to do when it came to the sport. But it started to grow. Obviously, we had the professional leagues back then, and we had a chance to go. We were close to see Pelé and Giorgio Chinaglia and all the guys in the Cosmos play. And I grew up kind of aspiring to be like those guys in the Beckenbauers of the world. And I was blessed enough to be able to play all through high school, and took a gap year, and then played in college, and took another gap in a year and a half, and played a little semi-pro in Florida with a few professional teams here, and then went into coaching. So I've been around the game pretty much my whole life. I've worn just about every hat, and I'm super excited about what we've put together and what we're creating here with the PCDA and the U, and the opportunity that it's going to provide for a lot of boys, much like ourselves, where we were at. If we, everyone I've been talking to said, boy, if we had this when we were growing up, could you just imagine where we might have wound up or where we would be? So, I'm super excited to be here. I'm a soccer guy all the way through, and really die. So.
Brilliant. Quick question. You said something about coming up in the 70s. How do you look younger than me? What's your secret there? Because I'm just about to be in my mid-30s, and granted I was a goalkeeper, my face has had a couple of surgeries, but how are you doing it, Pete? What's your secret, man? Because I'm sure everybody who's watching will want to know this secret. It's probably the $1 million secret, isn't it?
Anti-aging and energy formula, man. I think it's just living your passion, doing what you love, man, and spending your days around kids, because they tend to inject you with life at the same time, and anytime I found myself not in a career that maybe I chose and got away from the game, I always found myself coming back to it. So I'm gonna tell you, that's my special sauce, man. It's just a beautiful game.
Brilliant. Right, we'll get back to the serious stuff. So after the last episode with the CEO of PCDA, Ryan, we've been getting quite a few questions about ATTPS. That's our 5-pillar ethos, I guess, is one of the best words to use. Can you give us a snapshot of what ATTPS actually is?
Yeah, man. It's 5 really critical components or categories, if you will, around where we would assess and evaluate players through, and ultimately, put our programs completely designed around them. The first one being academics, right? So it's really important to make sure that there's an academic component in the part of what we provide for the players when they show up. The other 2 are technical and tactical. So their ability to individually deal with the ball in situations, and they can technically do what they're required out of their positions, and then tactically can understand the game and the multiple different systems and how to play them, and what their roles would be within those position specific, and then ultimately in team environment. And then the other one is the physical and somewhat psychological piece. So we got to make sure that they're getting they need to build their bodies properly and fuel them properly, and teach them how to build a professional mindset. And the last piece is the social. With what we've got put together and what they're going to be learning on their own, it's going to be a grow up and level up time for them in their lives. And I'm sure most people who have worked with boys and girls that are coming out of high school, they might be excelling in one or two of these 2 areas, and they might be somewhat, maybe I hate to say the word average, but just really haven't really developed themselves in a couple of them, and they might be completely deficient in another one. So, our whole kind of methodology around it and philosophy is, if we're focusing on those 5 key core areas and components, and taking the time that we have with the individuals that are coming in to fully get them to the highest level in those 5 areas, what would they look like out of a 10-month cycle, coming into a potential collegiate program, going into a potential USL program, or if nothing else, looking at some of the opportunities that we'll be able to provide them. They're gonna be at a much further along in those areas. They'll be way more mature than they were when they showed up, and they would be ready. So their confidence levels would be through the roof.
Great, yeah. So I mean, you mentioned it in your answer that Another question that we've been getting quite a few, especially on the social media side, but when I've been talking with potential recruits as well, is 10 months, a 10-month season. All right. Obviously, that's our plan at PCDA, is to have the 10-month season where we're training and playing for 10 months. I mean, that's magic, right? I mean,
Yeah,
just like the rest of the world.
thinking about it.
I'm so excited. You have no idea. 10
Yeah, totally.
months, like the rest of the world, finally.
Yeah, it's crazy.
In your opinion, what are the benefits of a 10-month season? Like, what can we do for these kids and these players, these athletes in 10 months as a coach?
Yeah, well, it's life by design, not by default, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like, if you think about it, we're completely designing a 10-month program inside of those 5 categories that we just mentioned. So, you know, if you look, even for myself, growing up through high school, it was basically in Vermont, there really wasn't club. You had ODP, and then you had your high school team that you played for. And that was essentially it, if you were good enough to even make the ODP team, north or south, depending on what part of the state you lived in. So there really wasn't a lot of games to be played. So, you know, I was on the ski team, I was on the lacrosse team, I golfed, I did whatever I could to keep myself active and fit. But I only had really about probably 9, 10, maybe 12 weeks if we were lucky enough to go all the way into the state final, which we were, of playing the sport that I loved the most, and that was my predominant one. It's not that different, even though the boys are, you know, and girls are able to have club seasons. So they have essentially a cycle, if you will, of playing high school and playing for their club teams. But what happens once you leave high school is you now get put into a situation where, depending on what school you go to, if you're good enough to play, whether or not you got scholarships or not, you have to kind of sort that whole piece out. But you're really only playing competitively and training at a higher level for maybe 9, 10 weeks, maybe 12 if you're lucky. And then that's essentially it. You know, then you go into off season and you're, you know, your weight room training and you're doing whatever the coaches are having you do. But at the same time, you're missing out on so much development, so much time, and so many touches. Where our program, which is, once I looked at it, it was a no-brainer for me to push all my chips in on it. Was, even as a coach, to be able to work with that same crew for a total amount of 10 months straight, let alone as a player. I mean, you're talking about a full professional match schedule, full professional training environment, hooked up to technology, heat maps, how many touches, I mean, you name it. You know, 3 trimesters over the course of the 10 months of the different systems that you'd be playing. You start out with the back 4 and a 4-3-3 and a 4-4-2. You move into a 3-5-2 and a 3-4-3 over the next 90-day cycle. And then the last one, we're going into a 4-2-3-1 and a 4-5-1. How to build out of the back, how to press high, you know, how to transition, how to counter, like all the different aspects to the game, not to mention every technical piece that you would need to have developed within you. You're training 5 days a week in the mornings, you know, early to mid mornings, and then you're off to school doing your thing. You come back in the afternoon, late afternoon, early evening. We train again, tactical applications, guaranteed 1 match each week on Saturdays, maybe sometimes 2, depending on the schedule, if it allows. And against really, really good competition. I mean, we're diligently every single day on the phone already putting that calendar and that schedule together. And in most cases, probably for a lot of the boys that come in, it'll be a more competitive schedule, and they'll be playing more competitive games than maybe they have to this point. Reason being is, if they have a goal or aspiration to maybe go play in Division II, which for some players that is a goal. You know, they might say right now, you know, to be perfectly honest with you, Coach, I'm an NAIA, maybe Division III guy, but if I could come out of your program and get into a really good D2 school and go in and make an impact straight away, that would be huge for me. We're going to play D2 schools, so they're going to get a taste of what that level is like. We're going to hopefully set up friendlies and competition with some really good D1 schools, so they're going to get a taste of what that competition and what that level looks like. We're going to work really hard to get some USL matches and some, you know, MLS U23 matches in there. So they're going to know what all those different competitive environments look like, and then they can gauge themselves and where they're at. And the best part about what we're doing over 10 months is, especially with all the strength and conditioning components and the technology that we're adding, is we're going to know exactly. We have an insider that's going to be working with us that was a strength and conditioning coach in the MLS for 10 plus years, and he knows what all those tests are. So he's going to kind of give us a little bit of the secret sauce, if you will, around all those tests and benchmarks that players need to be at physically to meet those demands. So we're going to be able to test them inside of those exact same ones that the top guys are getting in the M right now. So how exciting is that for a player over the course of 10 months is they're going to get anywhere from 30 to 32, 36 matches. They're going to be training every day, 2 times a day, classroom, I mean, you name it. They're going to be getting it all. It's hard for me to think, as long as I've been doing this, to say that every single person that comes into any one of our 3 locations successfully makes it out into that, you know, entire 10-month cycle is not going to go on to a higher level when they come out. What that is, we don't know. I can't guarantee it, but I can absolutely guarantee that they're going to be far better when they leave than they were when they showed up, man. I can't wait. I can't wait.
Yeah. You've just got me so excited. I just wish I could press the old rewind button on my life and go back to when I was 18 and maybe have another shot at it. Who knows, you know? I mean,
totally.
You know, you have me at technology and strength conditioning, all that kind of stuff. I'm just really, really excited to get going. And obviously, I know you're not supposed to wish your life away, but let's be honest, August. Right.
Yeah. I was a gap year kid, man. You know, I literally took a year off. I wasn't ready to go to school and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so I had a brother that was living in LA at the time. So imagine that, right? I'm like, all right, well, I'll go live on his couch in Los Angeles, and he's, you know, seeking out his rock star career. And you know, in that 10-month time frame, I literally called my parents, I think, at 2 o'clock in the morning, crying like, I want to go to college. You know, it's like, I was dumb, man. I got an education of how to live, and you know, I was working, trying to pay rent and all that kind of stuff that a lot of kids weren't. So I know when I came into that first year in school, I was a little bit probably further along when it came to the maturation piece, the social piece, the psychological piece. But I had a whole year without ever touching the ball. So I had to now figure out how quickly could I catch back up to where all the level the boys were at once I got there. And, you know, it took me a couple seasons to finally really get leveled up there. But what it would be like if I had something like this back then, I totally would have chosen this.
Yeah. All right. Last question before I open up the forum. You've done your 1 or 2 years with PCDA. Okay. What next? What is after that? How would you or Ryan or anybody involved with PCDA help our athletes move on to their next level, whether it be, you know, college or, you know, 4-year school? What are the exit strategies?
Sure, man. Yeah. Well, it's like we were talking about before we even got started, the database that we're putting together with all of our collective networks right now is probably going to take us, that's a full-time job alone right now, isn't it? So, you know, we are fortunate to have a staff that's been around the game for a very, very long time, has a lot of connections throughout the soccer world on every level, JUCO, NAIA, D3, D2, D1. I mean, I was on the phone with a D2 coach last night, another D1 coach today. So our network is large. So we're obviously going to go into the areas that we have connections and contacts now, and we're getting the word out everywhere. So what does that necessarily translate to a player coming in and finishing, whether it's a 1 or 2 year program? Well, I think personally, the sky's the limit. And I'm usually one to set a big, hairy, you know what goal. I'm not afraid to kind of throw my hat over the wall. You know, it's kind of just how I've done things over the years. And you know, if they want to potentially go overseas and play, we have the connections and the contacts there. If they're good enough to make those academies and go study and play abroad, we have that opportunity. We have those pathways, and we're creating even more of them now. We had another big call today with someone that's got connections overseas in Europe for some of the first division and second division clubs over there based on the brand that they represent. So that's an opportunity. That's a possibility. I think a 4-year school, absolutely, because, you know, here in America, if not, you know, around the world, it's very important to get your education. That's why the A is first out of the 5 pillars, right? So I think any 4-year school, whether it D1, D2, D3, is definitely an opportunity. I still believe that there's probably going to be a handful of players, you know, maybe not first year, but second and third year, as we continue to get better at this, and we open up more locations and word starts to get out and we start doing proof positive, and coaches are getting the buzz around the kids that are coming out of the academy and sending some kids to us in a gap year or a redshirt year. I still think we'll have players that would be potential good enough quality for USL and maybe even MLS. You know, again, that's I like to shoot for the moon and land on the stars, and I'm not afraid to put that out there. You know, we have to do our job as coaches and as staff and as a business, as a company, if you will, to make sure that we produce the boys and get them to the level where they could potentially strive to and accomplish. But I think really any avenue, any pathway, any direction they want to go to coming out. And the best part about it is they don't use one lick of eligibility. So you could have an incoming junior academically with an associate's degree that hasn't used up one minute of their eligibility athletically yet. So you have an incoming junior academically that's a freshman athletically. It's just extraordinary, man. It's what's needed. It's what's been missing for a very, very long time here in the United States. So
yeah, I think again that 4 years after PCDA, 4 years of eligibility. I mean, that's just gold, isn't it? I know Ryan touched on it last week, and I'm still trying to get my head around it. But I know the big boss man has talked to the NCAA, and it is legit. So I think that's something. If you want to play competitive soccer for 6 years, that's something that we can definitely offer. And then obviously the exit strategies that you've just covered.
Think about that, man. 6 years. In the 2 years with us, they're going to get more soccer than they probably will once they go on to the 4 with their respective school. It's extraordinary. And we were on with a major influencer from the Mid-Atlantic States area yesterday, and he was saying, looking at it from his own son, who's signed on to a D1 school already, and he's like, "Guys, I'm almost kind of starting to reconsider it. Maybe, you know what I mean?" Because he was saying in one of the D1 schools in the area that he's from and around Pittsburgh, I think 60% of that starting roster for that school, who did pretty well in the tournament last year, was all like 20 to 21-year-old foreign players. So, and they was like, "Well, what about the US side?" He's like, "Look, I got to win right now. The only way I'm going to be able to attract the best US players is if I'm going deep into the tournament in my conference. I'm going to deep in the tournament NCAAs. And the only way I can do that right now is to bring a man over
right.
from overseas, because it takes us 2 years to grow and build a man in our current system and program, right? So I think that's essentially what we'll be able to provide for the US player and more importantly, the US coaches in the US system. So
Brilliant. Well, I've just got to say hello to Sean Green, who put a little welcome in there. We've got Soccer Coach TV watching us, so the pressure's on now. I was fine, but now I'm all nervous. I was excited. I've gone through every single feeling and emotion you can have in 17 minutes. I was excited, nervous, and now I'm really, 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 really nervous. So. So we got a couple of questions come through, and Jim Masker. Jim, how are you doing, mate? I coach one of Jim's sons, one of my previous places. He's asked, I have a couple of kids asking what the cost for a player is, and luckily we have somebody online on the Facebook page there answering. So it depends whether the student wants the academy and housing, academy housing and schooling, financial aids available, that kind of stuff. We're not just going to throw numbers out at people. At the end of the day, if you are interested, let's go ahead and get yourselves applied, and somebody from PCDA will reach out to you. Unfortunately for Pete, he's taking the brunt of that right now, aren't you, Pete? You're in the mixer, and you were recruiting this past weekend, correct?
Yeah. We were in Spartanburg. Lee Squires with Lander University had a ID camp out there that we were fortunate enough to be able to be invited out to and speak to some of the boys, and we've got a handful there that we've reached out to personally. And it was great to be able to kind of, again, just quote unquote test the market and kind of just share what we're doing and our own personal stories and testimonies as to why we're here, why I've upped my family and relocated, and really see the long-term potential of what we're doing here, and being able to find now another avenue for myself to really give back to the game for everything that's done for me over my lifetime. And I think that, to kind of just touch on that question there, I think it's important. It's another added value proposition is it's customizable. I wasn't really sure myself once I first looked at it. That was one of my questions, because I've got daughters that are in high school, and hopefully by the time they graduate, maybe we'll have a girls component going somewhere. But the idea of looking at, there's 3 or 4 different options that you could choose as a player and a family coming in, based on, again, everything is life by design, not by default. What your goal is, what your strategy is. So the boys that I've actually been talking to, they're thinking, I'm getting them to think. I'm like, look, you have to start looking at the next 2 years of your life. I understand at your age, you don't necessarily have to, or maybe don't want to, but if you're coming to work with me, and we're going to go do what we've got to do, you're going to have to deal with me too. And you're going to have to really start looking at your life, looking beyond just right now, where do you want to be? How do you goal set and then reverse engineer that goal like a GPS? We've got milestone coordinates in the calendar that if we know we're meeting those along the way, you're going to be able to reach that pinnacle, whatever that top is. And the fact that you can customize the educational piece, you can customize your participation piece at 4 different components or levels, and financial ways to get involved I think is fantastic.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, we've got a question here from Sean. He's really, I'll tell you what, he's putting the pressure on, isn't he? Is the high level of international players in the college level good for the US game?
I think it is, personally. Yeah, if you look at how far we've come, and I can probably speak to it as being the most elder statesman, and most calls will be on, exception of maybe Steve Richards and a couple other guys that we know. But literally been around the game since I was 1972, 1973. To see how far the game has come, it was something I always dreamed of and hoped for, and never imagined it actually would in my lifetime. And just to see how intelligent the players are, just US-based players that are coming up. I do think there are some system breakdowns with the way things are done, and we'll save that for a different conversation, maybe over a pint or something. But I do believe it's still good for the game here in the US. It's we have to continue to find ways to look in the mirror and challenge ourselves to say, where is our identity? When are we going to start saying, you know what, enough's enough? Bring all the European players you want, because we're ready for that. You know what I mean? And I just think it automatically makes you better if you're around players that are coming from a higher level, like you level up to that, right? Yeah. So I think it's good. I think it's good personally.
Like how you threw our little catchphrase in there as well, level up. That's brilliant. Good thinking on your part. That was on the fly as well. Brilliant. I'm afraid, guys, that's all we've got time for this week. Tune in next week.
It's brief, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
I thought it was an hour. I thought it was an hour, man.
Ding dang do. Yeah, no, problem is, if we go longer than like 25 minutes, that's when people like me switch off, even if it is about soccer. It's like,
yeah, fair enough. On a Friday night too,
an issue. So, and it if I'm running the show, I'm going to start talking to myself eventually. So, yeah. Well, Pete, it's been a pleasure, mate, and I look forward to the old meeting next week to catch up on what you've been doing this coming weekend in regards to recruitment and stuff like that. So,
yeah, we're
thanks for your
gangbusters
time, mate, and thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you next week.
All right, thanks, guys.